Today, the textile waste diversion page received a wonderful question by Karen, and I'm going to read you her post. Hi, after seeing the negative press about some textile recycling programs, I wonder if you could give me a better idea of the breakdown of how you recycle. What gets used where, and do you ship any textiles overseas or sell to companies that do? Just hoping you are a much better version of the recycling from what I've seen in the press. It would be great if this info was available on your website. Thank you for your attention. And, oh man, you touched on my favorite soapbox, Karen. So thank you for opening up this Pandora's box. So the first thing I would caution is, in the era of fake news, understand that fake news applies to news. And it is way more mainstream than you think. It's very one-sided and not accurate a lot of the time. And it's weird how, you know, in one hand they disparage, for example, the export industry, and especially as it pertains to East Africa, but then those same outlets will tell you that the only charities you can trust to donate to are the very charities that primarily export all of this stuff to East Africa. And they fail to tell you that there's a whole family of organizations that collects for the local thrift store market and for emerging markets overseas, where the used clothing has a very positive impact on their local economy, as opposed to the accusations we're getting from East Africa that we're undermining their economy. I'm glad you reached out to a company that has been a leader in this industry, has set a new standard for this industry, and was the first company to partner with a municipality on a program to collect textile waste. So this is something we take very seriously. We were also studying green tech before anybody else was in this industry. So we've always been leading the way, and we're very proud to do so. So we are a good company. But let's unpack your question, okay? Because there's a lot here. And I love this question. Okay, so the negative press. So forget the press, because they've been pushing somebody's agenda, and it's not the agenda of truth, I'll tell you that. I wonder if you have an idea of a breakdown of how you recycle. Okay, important statement. There is no recycling in Canada, and anybody who's using that term is misleading you. They're not recycling. What Canada has is an incredibly effective reuse program. And I'll remind everybody that in terms of the 3 R's, reuse actually gets you more points than technically recycling, okay? So we have a reuse program. 98% of all textiles have a reuse function in the economy. So those can be resold either industrially or for the secondhand market in different grades. Now, Canadians are very discerning, including Canadians in need. And because everybody's addicted to fast fashion, the majority of what we're collecting is crap, frankly, and only about 20% of what we're collecting is good enough to be sold or used in the charity sector or in the reuse, local reuse sector. So because we don't have green tech, and green tech, by the way, was undermined by, in my opinion, a lot of Goliaths in this industry, or the few that there are, because they were trying to keep that East Africa route thriving, and they didn't want any competition for it, because East Africa used to get tons of volumes of the lowest grade quality stuff, which is why they're so mad at us in the first place. But anyway, so green tech competed with that, so it was undermined. And so what ended up happening was this East Africa trade model became the norm. So recycling doesn't exist in Canada. Reuse is the best we've got. And if we're going to be so picky, what do we do with all the stuff that nobody wants? Because unless we export it, it's going to get dumped, because green tech was undermined. We don't have a choice. And I know nobody wants to hear that. And this is not a textile waste diversion thing. This is an industry-wide thing. This has been the soapbox I've been screaming on since 2011. I've been screaming and pulling my hair at this. And I'm loathed for it, because this is stuff nobody wants to talk about, right? It's one of those inconvenient truth things. So yeah, we export. The question you want to ask is, where do you export? Right now, the sorting hub of the world is Dubai and Pakistan, and we've heard things about how their foreign labor force is treated. So you want to ask that question. But what happens when you export to South America? It doesn't have the same impact. So the issue in East Africa is they claim that they have they did have a thriving garment sector, and us bringing in really cool used clothing was undermining their garment sector and having a rippling effect on the economy, because the garment fashion industry has a massive economic impact anywhere it operates, anywhere it thrives. Yves Saint Laurent, Christian Dior. I made a mistake. Christian Dior was credited for turning an economic recession around just because of a design of a skirt. I'm not even kidding you, because of all the fabric that was required, and that got the milling businesses open, and the job multiplication factor in the textile industry is about 1 to 66. So every job that was created there supported 66 other jobs, and bang. So it has huge impact. So if our clothes are truly undermining, and like I said, there's arguments against this, because where we're sending our clothes in East Africa, people aren't buying new clothes. So I don't know what customers they think they're losing. So that's what the debate is there. So as much as it serves me to do the virtue signal against exporting to East Africa, I'm not convinced those allegations are true. But in any case, so there's a lot of issues around East Africa, but in South America, it's different. What we see in South America are entrepreneurs that save enough money to be able to buy a mixed bale. One mixed bale is enough to open a market stall. And there are these market stall villages that are famous in South America. So to have a stall, it's the quickest way you're going to become an entrepreneur. And that just gets them out of the poverty cycle. If you're entrepreneurial, you will thrive. And this business allows you an entry point to thrive. So it's something that we can be proud of, opening those emerging markets. I'll tell you, one of the biggest pirates in this industry, and I'm talking every horrible thing you could think about a rogue operator, this guy's the poster child for. I will give him credit for opening a new market in Eastern Europe. And he did that on his own, and it was a place that nobody invested, nobody thought to open, and he found a way of doing it. And I have to, give credit where it's due, because these big Goliaths and these charities that everybody should be trusting, apparently, they just keep feeding the East Africa Goliath, the East Africa machine. So this is where the press doesn't get the whole story. So the press is pushing spin, and half the time I don't even think they're aware that they're doing it. Okay, so I guess that's it. Now, in terms of, it's great if this info was available on your website. I've been obsessed about this stuff, like I said, since 2011. So if you go through old blog posts on the website or old videos on this page, you're going to be sick of me. I'm whining about this stuff, and you'll see that my perception changes as I start to understand the global market a lot better. So the world is thinking, I want, if I have a pair of jeans and I give it to diabetes, I want someone with diabetes to wear my jeans. And that's an unfair expectation. That's not how this sector works. So we need to just wipe that from people's perceptions. And this industry's done a terrible job of telling you why we're okay the way we are. So what happens is your used clothes are traded on the international commodities market like every other export Canada depends on for an economy. So this is a good thing. The press has made you think it's bad because, frankly, they're stupid. So really what's happening is Canada needs exports, and our used clothing is a hefty export. The problem we've had is an industry Goliath that's not even Canadian, has dominated collections and therefore has dominated the export. They've infiltrated municipalities, and their narrative has trickled all the way through to law enforcement and the press. And what happens is now we have monopolization in the industry, which is, and all this negative press, by the way, has undermined the export industry and the sorting industry in Canada. 3/4 of them have moved to Dubai and Pakistan and took all those jobs with them. So what the negative press has contributed to is actually the collapse of an entire economy in Canada, in a sector that, by the way, paid 22% higher than the provincial average. which means even people at the lowest rung of this industry can do better sometimes than doing the same job somewhere else. So these were good jobs, good paying jobs. A huge portion of these jobs were perfect for barrier employment situations, language barriers, intellectual barriers, communication barriers, no problem in this industry. There's lots of room for people like that. And that just got destroyed on an empty virtue signal. So the press is what they're doing is misleading you. When you hear recycling programs, they're misleading you. Canada has not been recycling. But because these charities use that term, everybody thinks, and including the government, oh, we're recycling, I guess, so we're good. No, we haven't been recycling, which is why we're sending so much stuff to East Africa, to the point that we're hearing these articles and seeing tariffs being threatened, and I don't even blame them. Even if it's not true what we're doing to the economy, that is an outdated model. We need, if we're going to play the globalization game, then we need to truly be global. We need to be diverse. We need competition in the industry. We need innovation. And that's not going to happen with a Goliath in charge. So that's what the press isn't telling you. And what does this all come down to? Lobbyists. This all comes out. This is the question that really should be asked. It's about lobbying in the industry. The charities have these big fancy lobbyists because your donor money gives them lots of money to play with. So they can afford all these studies and engineers and opinion polls and fancy commercials and whatever to spin a specific narrative. And one of the things they get are fancy lobbyists. So these lobbyists go into municipalities and poor me, poor me, poor me, and they push the narrative that for-profit companies are rogue and that they're all evil. They've got mayors spewing this stuff, and then municipalities push regulations that make it hard for people to compete. Some municipalities like Markham or Stratford or some places in York Region now are practically creating monopolies for one or two, 3 charities, and everybody else gets kicked out. So now it's getting to an extreme, and it's lobbyists that make that happen. These guys call themselves strategic relationships or some crap. You know what I mean? So then when I call them a lobbyist, they get mad. How could you say that? Because it's true. A lot of people don't want to tell the truth in this industry right now, so it's very inconvenient. And one of the truths is that we are dependent on export because green technology was undermined. We're dependent on export, including East Africa. But the only reason we're dependent on East Africa is because municipalities are giving East African Goliaths monopolies in Ontario. So therefore, the companies that were actually expanding in emerging markets where we weren't having a negative economic impact were undermined and forced to stall their operations. So that's the deal. So thank you, Karen, for your question. If this opens up other questions, let's have the convo. That's one thing this industry hasn't had is open conversation, and I really think it's time. So let's do it.